What if everything you thought you knew about ancient civilizations was incomplete? For centuries, we've built our understanding of human history on textbooks, legends, and the stories passed down through generations. But what happens when the ground beneath our feet literally unearths secrets that rewrite those narratives? Archaeology has a unique way of humbling even the most confident experts, revealing fragments of the past that don't just fill in gaps, they tear them wide open. These aren't minor curiosities, they're discoveries so strange, so out of place, that they force us to question the very timeline of human achievement. From artifacts that seem technologically impossible for their time to structures aligned with cosmic precision long before modern science, these finds don't just add to history, they challenge it. Today, we're setting out on a journey to explore 25 of the most puzzling archaeological discoveries ever made. These are the enigmas that have left researchers scratching their heads, debates raging in academic circles, and amateurs dreaming up theories that range from the plausible to the extraordinary. Each of these finds carries with it a sense of mystery, a whisper from the past that refuses to be easily explained. They hint at lost knowledge, forgotten civilizations, and possibilities that stretch the imagination. Think about it. How did ancient cultures achieve precision we struggle to replicate even with today's technology? Why do certain symbols and designs appear across continents separated by oceans and millennia? The answers, if they ever come, might redefine not just history but our understanding of human potential. This isn't just a list, it's an invitation to look at the world through a different lens, to look closer at the echoes of something grander, something older, and something far more mysterious than we often give our ancestors credit for. As we dive into these 25 bewildering finds, you'll encounter everything from enigmatic mechanisms that shouldn't exist to massive monuments whose purpose remains hotly debated centuries after their discovery. Some of these puzzles may never be fully solved, and that's part of what makes them so compelling. They remind us that history is not a closed book but an ongoing investigation, full of twists, turns, and tantalizing clues waiting for the right curious mind to piece them together. So settle in and prepare to witness the artifacts and sights that continue to captivate, confuse, and inspire wonder across the globe. Our journey begins not in a dusty desert tomb but at the bottom of the sea, where a storm in the year 1901 forced sponge divers off the coast of a small Greek island called Antikythera to take shelter. When they ventured into the depths the next day, they stumbled upon the ancient wreck of a Roman cargo ship, its hull filled with marble statues, ceramics, and other treasures. Among the heavily corroded artifacts recovered was a lump of bronze and wood that seemed so unremarkable it was almost overlooked, set aside with other miscellaneous finds. For nearly half a century, it sat in the back rooms of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, a curious but misunderstood object. It wasn't until the 1950s that a scientist named Derek J. Price took a serious interest in this corroded lump. Using early X-ray technology to peer inside, he revealed the truth. This was no simple piece of wreckage. It was, in fact, the single most sophisticated mechanical object to survive from the ancient world. We now know it as the Antikythera Mechanism. What makes this device so utterly baffling is its intricate internal structure. It's a complex clockwork system of at least 30 precise bronze gears, all housed within a wooden case roughly the size of a large shoebox. On the outside were dials and pointers, and inscriptions served as a user's manual. This wasn't just a simple calendar, it was a portable, hand-cranked astronomical computer. By turning a handle on the side, an ancient user could calculate the movements of the sun and the moon, predict lunar and solar eclipses with astonishing accuracy, and even track the cycles of the known planets. It modeled the irregular orbit of the moon, a complex motion we now call the first lunar anomaly, which requires a sophisticated differential gear, a technology historians of science were certain had not been invented until the 16th century. The mechanism predates that by over 1,600 years. The purpose of such a device is as fascinating as its engineering. It was likely used for both scientific inquiry and practical necessity. For ancient Greek astronomers, it was a dynamic model of the universe, a way to test and demonstrate their theories. For society at large, its eclipse predictions held deep cultural and religious significance, as these celestial events were often seen as powerful omens. It could also calculate the dates of major athletic games like the ancient Olympics, weaving together science, religion, and civic life into one exquisite machine. The existence of the Antikythera Mechanism forces a complete re-evaluation of ancient technological capability. It wasn't a one-off miracle but proof of a lost tradition of high engineering in ancient Greece, a tradition referenced in vague historical texts but never before seen. It suggests a level of mechanical sophistication that we simply did not attribute to that era, hinting that the scientific revolution of the Renaissance may have been a rediscovery of concepts that were mastered and then tragically lost over a millennium before. Moving from a machine that reveals unexpected genius in ancient Greece, we now turn to a book that conceals its secrets behind a veil of incomprehensible text. Imagine discovering a manuscript filled with writing that looks familiar yet is completely unreadable, accompanied by illustrations of plants that don't exist and celestial diagrams that don't match any known astronomy. This is the enduring mystery of the Voynich Manuscript, a book that has stubbornly resisted decipherment for over a century, earning its reputation as the most mysterious book in the world. The manuscript itself is a physical artifact dating to the early 15th century, based on vellum testing and the style of its illustrations. It consists of around 240 fragile pages, covered from edge to edge in an elegant, unknown script. This isn't a simple substitution cipher where one letter stands for another. It appears to be a fully developed language system with its own unique alphabet and grammatical rules. The text flows smoothly with words that follow distinct phonetic and structural patterns, suggesting it was written by someone fully fluent in this enigmatic language. But the writing is only half the puzzle. The pages are filled with vibrant, strange, and often unsettling illustrations that divide the book into thematic sections. There are detailed paintings of herbal plants that no botanist has ever been able to identify, their roots and leaves resembling nothing in our natural world. Other sections feature intricate astrological charts with zodiac symbols arranged in unfamiliar constellations, alongside circular diagrams of unknown purpose that seem to depict biological or perhaps even microscopic processes. One of the most bizarre sections is filled with drawings of naked women, often called nymphs, bathing in or connecting to a complex network of green pipes and vessels, an imagery that has been interpreted as everything from an allegorical representation of human physiology to a diagram of a magical alchemical process. Since its modern discovery by a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich in 1912, the manuscript has been a siren's call to the world's top cryptographers and linguists. Teams from the Second World War and later the Cold War, including codebreakers who successfully cracked Nazi Enigma codes, have turned their formidable skills to the Voynich, only to be completely defeated. Every proposed solution, from it being a coded form of Latin or Hebrew to an early artificial language, has crumbled under scrutiny. The text defies every statistical and linguistic tool we have. The word patterns are consistent enough to feel like a real language, yet they don't align with any known human tongue. This relentless failure has fueled a wide range of theories about its origins. Some argue it is the sole surviving work of a completely lost culture, a linguistic dead end with no Rosetta Stone to provide a key. Others believe it was created as an elaborate and expensive hoax, perhaps by a clever forger like Edward Kelly, to deceive a wealthy patron like Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II into paying a fortune for a book of magical secrets. There's even a fringe theory that it could be a glossolalia text, a stream of unconsciousness written in a made-up language during a trance state. Yet, the internal consistency and complex structure of the writing make the hoax theory difficult for many to accept, as creating a fake language that so perfectly mimics natural linguistic patterns would have been a staggering intellectual feat in itself centuries before modern linguistics. What makes the Voynich Manuscript so uniquely frustrating is that it is a complete, beautifully crafted volume that clearly held immense meaning for its author. It was not meant to be nonsense. It was designed to be read and understood. Someone, somewhere 500 years ago, knew exactly what these symbols meant and what these bizarre illustrations represented. They poured knowledge, or what they believed to be knowledge, onto these pages. That knowledge is now utterly silent, locked away behind a linguistic barrier that has so far proven unbreakable. It stands as a profound and humbling reminder that the past does not always willingly give up its secrets, and that some puzzles are crafted to endure, challenging each new generation to try and hear the whisper of a lost voice. While the Antikythera Mechanism and the Voynich Manuscript represent puzzles of sophisticated knowledge, our next discovery presents a mystery of a much more humble appearance, or one that asks a profound question. Did an ancient civilization stumble upon the principles of electricity 2,000 years before it was officially discovered? In the 1930s, during excavations of a 2,000-year-old Parthian village near Baghdad, a group of archaeologists unearthed a number of rather simple-looking clay jars. These weren't particularly ornate or immediately striking, but their contents were bizarre. Each jar contained a rolled-up copper sheet forming a cylinder, and nestled inside that cylinder was a single iron rod. The assembly was sealed at the top with an asphalt plug, which also served to keep the iron rod perfectly suspended and insulated in the center of the copper cylinder. If these jars were filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, something remarkable would happen. A chemical reaction would occur, generating a small electrical charge between the two different metals. In essence, this simple object would function as a primitive battery, now famously known as the Baghdad Battery. The implications of this are staggering, and they form the heart of a heated and ongoing debate. If this interpretation is correct, it means the Parthians, or perhaps the earlier Sasanians who also occupied the region, possessed a foundational understanding of electrochemistry over a millennium and a half before Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery in the year 1800. Proponents of the battery theory point to several potential uses for such a device. One of the most compelling is electroplating, the process of using an electrical current to bond a thin layer of a precious metal, like gold, onto the surface of a less valuable metal, like silver. Artisans in Mesopotamia were known for their exquisite gold-plated silver artifacts, and while they had other chemical methods for achieving this effect, a weak electrical current could have provided a more efficient and controlled alternative. Another, more speculative theory suggests these batteries could have been used for religious or mystical purposes. The slight electrical charge, perhaps applied to a metal statue, might have produced a faint tingling sensation or even a visible spark, creating a powerful, divine experience for worshippers, or a clever trick for priests to demonstrate their connection to the gods. However, the archaeological community is far from unanimous in accepting this electrifying hypothesis. Skeptics offer compelling counterarguments. The main issue is a complete lack of contextual evidence. No wires, no electrodes, and no electroplated artifacts that definitively required a battery to create have ever been found alongside these jars. Their original find location was not a workshop or a temple that might hint at their use, but rather a cellar stored away with other mundane objects. This has led many experts to propose much more mundane, though still important, explanations. The most widely accepted alternative theory is that these vessels were simply secure storage containers for important religious or magical scrolls. The iron rod could have been the core around which a precious scroll made of organic material, like papyrus or parchment, was rolled. The copper cylinder would have protected it, and the asphalt seal would have made the container both airtight and sacred, protecting the text inside from decay and tampering. In this light, the Baghdad Battery isn't a technological marvel but a practical and sophisticated ancient safe. The debate ultimately encapsulates a fundamental challenge in archaeology: interpreting function from form. Without a manual or an explicit description from the people who made it, we are left to infer purpose from the object itself. The battery theory is seductive because it speaks to a narrative of lost ancient wisdom, a tantalizing glimpse of what might have been. The scroll storage theory is less glamorous but perhaps more archaeologically prudent. The truth may never be fully settled, leaving these peculiar clay jars suspended in a state of beautiful uncertainty, a powerful testament to the fact that sometimes the simplest-looking artifacts can hold the most complex and shocking secrets. Deep in the tropical river deltas of Costa Rica, a different kind of puzzle was emerging from the mud, one of perfect geometry in a wild landscape. In the 1930s, as the United Fruit Company was clearing vast tracts of jungle for banana plantations, their bulldozers began to unearth something utterly unexpected: colossal stone spheres, some partially buried, others resting in mysterious groupings. Ranging from the size of a tennis ball to massive orbs over 2.5 meters in diameter and weighing up to 16 tons, these near-perfect spheres were carved from a hard, volcanic rock called granodiorite. Their surfaces were astonishingly smooth, their shapes so precise that when modern researchers measured them, they found a degree of spherical perfection that rivals what we can achieve with modern machinery. The immediate question was how and why did an ancient culture working over 1,000 years ago without metal tools, the wheel, or draft animals create such flawless objects on such a monumental scale? The creation process itself is a profound mystery that speaks to incredible patience and skill. Archaeologists believe the pre-Columbian Decquis culture, who inhabited the region from around 800 CE until the Spanish conquest, were the creators. They likely identified large boulders in the foothills, then used a combination of meticulous techniques to shape them. The primary method is thought to be controlled fracture, heating the stone with fire, and then rapidly cooling it with water to create cracks and spall off large chunks. From there, the shaping would have been a painstaking process of pecking and grinding with stone hammers made of a harder material, likely abrading the surface with sand and water over generations to achieve that breathtaking smoothness and near-perfect roundness. The sheer amount of time and communal effort required for just one of the larger spheres is almost unimaginable, indicating that these objects held immense critical importance to their society. But what was that importance? Their purpose is the central enigma that fuels debate. One compelling theory is that they served as astronomical markers or a massive celestial calendar. Some spheres were found arranged in straight lines, triangles, or parabolic curves, and while many were moved by later settlers, researchers like Dr. Claude Bordes from the University of Paris identified alignments that could correspond to solstices, equinoxes, or other significant celestial events. In this view, the spheres were not just art, they were a sophisticated stone computer for tracking time and seasons, vital for an agricultural society. Another prominent theory assigns them a deeply social role. They may have been symbols of power, authority, and status, with the size, perfection, and number of spheres a family or clan owned directly reflecting their influence and wealth. Placed prominently near public buildings or the dwellings of important chiefs, they could have been potent symbols of identity and social hierarchy. There are also folk legends that speak of the spheres being navigational aids or that they contained hidden treasure, a belief that led to the tragic destruction of many spheres by treasure hunters who dynamited them in search of gold. The greatest tragedy is that we may never know their true meaning with certainty. The Decquis culture had largely disappeared by the time of European contact, and no written records exist to explain the spheres. Furthermore, many were moved from their original positions by the initial banana companies and later by Costa Ricans who used them as decorative lawn ornaments, completely erasing their archaeological context. This means we lost the crucial clues that their placement, their relationship to each other and to structures could have provided. Today, they are protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized as unique masterpieces of human ingenuity. They stand as silent, stoic sentinels from a lost world, their perfect curves a defiant contrast to the chaotic jungle. They represent a universal human drive to impose order, beauty, and meaning on the world, but the specific language of that meaning, the message they were meant to convey, has been lost to time, leaving us only with their perfect, silent, and mysterious form. From the enigmatic spheres of Costa Rica, we journey now to a different kind of artifact, one not carved from stone but drawn on parchment, a map that seems to chart the impossible. In the year 1929, scholars conducting an inventory of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace Library made a stunning discovery. Among the many ancient texts was a gazelle skin parchment map, drawn and signed in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. His work was itself a compilation, as he noted in the margins that he had used 20 source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. But the truly baffling element wasn't its age, it was what it depicted. The map showed the western coasts of Europe and Africa, the eastern coast of South America with remarkable accuracy, and most astonishingly, a landmass stretching northward from the bottom of the page. Piri Reis labeled this coastline, but the name he used sent chills through researchers. It was a region the ancient Greeks had theorized might exist, a vast southern continent they called Antarctica. The problem, the continent of Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820, over 3 centuries after this map was drawn. Even more perplexing, the coastline on the Piri Reis map doesn't match the heavily glaciated outline we know today. Instead, it appears to show the continent's topography as it would look without its mile-thick ice cap, a view that has been hidden for millions of years. This is the core of the mystery that has captivated and divided historians for decades. How could a 16th century cartographer have knowledge of a landmass that would remain unknown to the rest of the world for centuries? And how could he possibly have depicted its subglacial geography, something that was only confirmed by modern seismic surveys and satellite radar in the 20th century? The most straightforward explanation, and the one supported by Piri Reis's own notes, is that he was piecing together his world map from a variety of older source maps, some from classical Greek and Phoenician explorers, and perhaps even one from Christopher Columbus. In this view, the landmass at the bottom might simply be a speculative addition, a lucky guess that accidentally aligns with a real continent. Skeptics point out that the map contains numerous inaccuracies and distortions, as was common for the period, and that the section interpreted as Antarctica could instead be a distorted representation of the eastern coast of South America, stretched to fit the parchment, or the hypothetical terra australis incognita that cartographers had been drawing for centuries. Yet, the alignment is so uncanny that many researchers find the coincidence argument unsatisfying. The work of historians like Charles Hapgood, who brought the map to widespread attention in the 1960s, proposed a far more radical theory. Hapgood, with support from none other than Albert Einstein, argued that the map's accuracy in depicting the Queen Maud Land region of Antarctica was too precise to be guesswork. He postulated that it must have been copied from much older source maps, themselves based on surveys conducted by a highly advanced seafaring civilization that existed during a prehistoric warm period, a time when Antarctica's coastline was indeed ice-free. This theory points to a cataclysm that wiped this civilization from history, leaving only fragments of their knowledge to be passed down and copied by later cultures like the Greeks and Phoenicians, eventually finding their way onto the desk of an Ottoman admiral. The debate is a perfect storm of cartographic analysis, geological history, and archaeological speculation. Modern scholarship tends to lean away from the ancient advanced civilization hypothesis, citing a lack of any corroborating evidence. However, the map refuses to be easily dismissed. It remains a profound and tantalizing outlier. Whether it is a miraculous fragment of lost ancient knowledge, an incredible cartographic coincidence, or a misunderstood amalgamation of 16th century guesswork, the Piri Reis Map forces us to confront the gaps in our historical record. It is a ghost on parchment, a whisper of a possibility that our planet's geography was known to explorers whose names and nations are now utterly lost to time, their achievements erased by the very ice that preserves the secret of their possible existence. Leaving behind the speculative coastlines of ancient maps, we arrive at one of archaeology's most visually stunning and enduring puzzles, etched not on parchment but into the very earth itself. In the arid, wind-swept plains of southern Peru, a vast canvas of dark desert pavement stretches between the towns of Nazca and Palpa. At ground level, this landscape appears as a monotonous expanse of reddish-brown pebbles, but ascend to the sky and a breathtaking transformation occurs. The entire plateau, over 500 square kilometers, is covered in enormous drawings known as geoglyphs. These are the Nazca Lines, a collection of hundreds of figures ranging from perfectly straight lines that run for miles to intricate depictions of a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey with an extravagantly coiled tail, a killer whale, and even a humanoid figure often called the astronaut. The sheer scale is incomprehensible from the ground. Many of the designs are over 300 feet across, their full form only revealing itself from several hundred feet in the air. This fact alone, their invisibility to their own creators, is the seed from which the deepest mystery grows. The method of their creation, while still a feat of immense effort, is the one aspect that is relatively well understood. The Nazca people, a pre-Incan culture that flourished between 200 BCE and 600 CE, created these designs by a simple yet ingenious process of subtraction. The desert floor here is not sand, but a layer of dark iron oxide-coated pebbles. Beneath this thin, dark layer lies a substrate of much lighter colored sand. The Nazca artisans, working from scaled-up models, would have carefully removed the top layer of stones along the outlines of their designs, exposing the bright sand beneath. The region's extraordinary dryness, minimal rainfall, and constant wind patterns actually work to preserve these lines. Instead of being covered over, the removed stones slowly settle and develop a desert varnish, creating a permanent contrast with the freshly exposed sand that keeps the designs visible for millennia. The real question isn't so much how they made them, but how they engineered them with such precision without ever being able to see their full, magnificent work. This leads directly to the central and most debated enigma. What was their purpose? Why would a culture invest such colossal communal effort into creating art that, by all accounts, they could never fully appreciate? The theories are as varied as the designs themselves. One of the earliest and most persistent ideas, championed by researcher Maria Reich, who dedicated her life to studying the lines, is that they served as a massive astronomical calendar. The straight lines and geometric shapes could have been aligned with celestial bodies, marking solstices, equinoxes, and the rising of important stars to dictate planting and harvesting seasons for their agriculture-based society. However, while some alignments exist, modern statistical analysis has shown that just as many lines point nowhere significant, weakening the idea that astronomy was their sole function. A more widely accepted theory today is that the lines held profound religious and ceremonial significance. In the harsh desert environment, water was the most sacred and elusive resource. Many of the animal figures, like the hummingbird or the monkey, are associated with water, rain, or fertility in Andean cosmology. The straight lines could have been sacred pathways walked by priests during rituals to summon life-giving water from the deities. The entire desert plain may have been a vast ritual landscape, a temple without walls, where the act of creating and maintaining the lines was itself a form of worship, a way to communicate with the gods. The fact that the figures could only be seen by the gods high above would make perfect sense in this context. They were never meant for human eyes, but were offerings meant to be viewed from the heavens. Of course, the line's visibility only from the air has also fueled more speculative theories, the most famous being the ancient astronaut hypothesis popularized by Erich von Däniken. This idea suggests the lines were landing strips or signals for extraterrestrial visitors, a theory that, while captivating to the public, is roundly dismissed by archaeologists due to a complete lack of evidence and the fact that the soft, rocky ground would be entirely unsuitable for landing any form of advanced aircraft. The true answer likely lies in a combination of the spiritual and the practical. The Nazca Lines were probably a multifunctional masterpiece of a sophisticated culture. They were a celestial calendar, a ritual walking space, and a permanent prayer for water etched into the very skin of the earth. They represent a powerful communal effort, a project that would have required generations of people working in concert toward a shared spiritual goal. They stand today not just as a testament to human ingenuity, but to a deep and universal human desire to connect with something greater than ourselves, to leave a mark so large and lasting that even the gods would have to take notice. The desert has kept their secret well, preserving these enormous drawings not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a permanent monument to faith itself. High in the Andes Mountains, overlooking the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, lies a fortress that defies both time and explanation. Sacsayhuaman is a marvel of megalithic architecture, a sprawling complex of zigzagging walls constructed from limestone blocks so enormous that their very presence seems to defy the laws of physics and logic. The scale is staggering. Some of these stones stand over 28 feet tall and are estimated to weigh more than 360,000 pounds, rivaling the largest blocks used in the Egyptian pyramids. But it's not their size alone that has baffled engineers and archaeologists for centuries. It's the mind-bending precision with which they were shaped and assembled. The stones are polygonal, meaning they have multiple sides and angles, and they fit together in a complex three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. The joints between them are so incredibly tight that you cannot slide a piece of paper, let alone a razor blade, between them. This isn't just mortarless construction. It's a seamless fusion of rock that has withstood hundreds of years of earthquakes that have toppled countless Spanish colonial buildings erected on top of them. The mystery of how the Inca, who did not use the wheel, iron tools, or even a written language, achieved this perfection is one of archaeology's greatest engineering puzzles. The official explanation is that it was a feat of immense human labor and sophisticated stone-working skill. Quarries for the distinctive limestone were located several miles away. It's theorized that hundreds, perhaps thousands of workers would have used stone hammers to rough out the blocks before levering them onto log rollers and using a system of ropes and ramps to drag them up and down the steep Andean hills to the construction site. The finer shaping, the part that truly astonishes, is thought to have been done through a process of trial and error. Stonemasons might have used a method called inking, where they would have rubbed a colored liquid on the protrusion of one stone and then lowered the next stone onto it. The transfer of the pigment would show the high spots on the new stone, which would then be painstakingly pecked away with harder stones. This process would be repeated over and over until the fit was flawless. It's a theory that demonstrates incredible patience and skill, but for many, it struggles to fully account for the microscopic precision and the sheer number of perfectly interlocking stones across the entire site. This gap in the conventional explanation has naturally given rise to more speculative theories about lost ancient technologies. Some researchers point to the vitrified or almost melted appearance of the rock surfaces and suggest the Inca might have possessed a method for temporarily softening the stone using a plant-based chemical compound, allowing them to mold the blocks like clay before they hardened back into their natural state. While intriguing, no archaeological evidence for such a substance has ever been found. Other theories venture even further, proposing that the Inca had access to advanced sonic or vibrational technology that could precisely fracture and shape rock, a concept that, while captivating, remains firmly in the realm of speculation without any concrete proof. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Sacsayhuaman is not just the how, but the why. Why invest such an unimaginable amount of labor and time into achieving this level of perfection? The answer likely lies in the Inca worldview. For them, the spiritual and the practical were inseparable. The fortress was a symbol of Inca imperial power, but it was also a deeply sacred site. The zigzagging walls are said to represent the teeth of the puma, whose outline the city of Cusco was famously designed to form. The incredible fit of the stones was not merely an engineering goal, it was a spiritual one. In the Inca belief system, the world was alive, and the stones themselves held a life force. By fitting them together so perfectly without any empty space, they were creating a harmonious, living structure. The walls were not just built, they were woven together, creating a permanent, unshakable connection with the earth itself. A connection so strong that even the tremors of the gods could not break it. Sacsayhuaman, therefore, stands as a testament to a culture that saw no distinction between artistic beauty, architectural genius, and spiritual devotion, leaving behind a puzzle that continues to humble modern builders and captivate everyone who witnesses its silent, stoic grandeur. While the walls of Sacsayhuaman represent a known culture achieving the seemingly impossible, our next discovery suggests the possibility of something far more radical, a human artifact existing in a time when it simply shouldn't. In the summer of 1936, near the small town of London, Texas, a couple were walking along a creek bed when they noticed a curious piece of rock with what appeared to be a piece of wood protruding from it. Taking it home, they eventually cracked the rock open to reveal an incredible interior, a full, well-formed iron hammer with a wooden handle, completely encased within the solid stone nodule. This object, now famously known as the London Hammer, wasn't just lying loose on the ground. It was found inside the rock, suggesting it had been there for the entire duration of the rock's formation. And according to standard geological dating, that rock was identified as Cretaceous sandstone, dating back over 100 million years. This single object, if its context is genuine, doesn't just add a footnote to history, it tears the entire textbook to shreds, suggesting that a technologically advanced culture existed alongside the dinosaurs. The immediate and obvious reaction from the scientific community was profound skepticism. The idea of a modern-style tool existing in the age of the dinosaurs is so antithetical to everything we know about human evolution and technological development that it demands an extraordinary level of proof. Critics of the out-of-place artifact, or OOP art, theory were quick to offer alternative explanations. The most prevalent is that the hammer is not ancient at all, but a miner's tool from the 19th century that was simply lost. The unique geochemical conditions of the region could have provided a rapid process for concretion formation. A concretion is a type of rock that forms when mineral cement precipitates and hardens around a nucleus, which can be a fossil, a shell, or in this case, a hammer. This process can happen relatively quickly in the right conditions, encasing the object in a rind of hard stone that can give the appearance of great antiquity. In this scenario, the hammer is exactly what it looks like, a recent tool that became encased in recently formed rock, creating a compelling but ultimately misleading illusion. However, proponents of the hammer's anomalous nature point to specific analyses that complicate the simple concretion theory. In the 1980s, the object was examined by the Battelle Laboratory in Columbus, Ohio, and later by the Institute for Creation Research. Their metallurgical analysis of the iron head revealed an unusual composition. It was reported to be over 96% iron, which is remarkably pure, and was also said to be clad in a thin layer of what was identified as iron chloride, a feature not typical of modern hammers. Furthermore, the analysis suggested the iron had been forged in a way that created a very low sulfur content, a characteristic of high-quality, ancient smithing techniques rather than modern industrial mass production. For those who believe the hammer is genuine, this evidence suggests it was crafted with a sophisticated, perhaps lost, metallurgical process, and its encasement in ancient rock is exactly what it appears to be. This debate sits at the heart of a classic conflict in anomalous archaeology: the reliability of context versus the reliability of the object itself. The original discoverers are long gone, and the exact circumstances of the find cannot be independently verified. Without a trained archaeologist present to document the precise stratigraphic layer from which it was removed, we are left with a story and a physical object. The scientific method requires repeatable, verifiable evidence, and a single anecdotal find, no matter how intriguing, is not enough to overturn an entire scientific paradigm. The London hammer, therefore, remains in a state of permanent limbo. It is a powerful symbol for those who believe in catastrophic timelines or ancient advanced civilizations, and it is an equally powerful example of a geological false positive for mainstream science. It forces us to ask a difficult question: what would it truly take to make us rewrite human history? What kind of evidence would be sufficient? The London hammer, for all its controversy, serves as a permanent reminder that our understanding of the past is a constantly evolving story, and while most anomalies have conventional explanations, the mere possibility of a genuine outlier keeps the door to wonder firmly open. Amidst the towering peaks of the Bayan Kara Ula Mountains on the border between China and Tibet, a discovery was made in 1938 that would launch one of the most enduring and controversial legends in all of alternative archaeology. According to the story, a Chinese professor of archaeology named Kai Pu-Te was leading an expedition through the remote, difficult-to-access caves of the region when he and his team made a bizarre find. Inside one cavern, they did not uncover ancient tools or the remains of early human habitation, but instead rows of neat, orderly graves containing the skeletons of what appeared to be a peculiar, diminutive people. These skeletons were described as being around 4 feet tall with unusually large, oversized skulls. Scattered throughout the burial site and across the cave floor were hundreds of unique stone discs, each roughly 9 inches in diameter with a perfectly round hole in the center, giving them the appearance of ancient stone records or phonographs. These objects would later become known as the Dropa Stones. The initial discovery was strange enough, but the alleged subsequent analysis of the discs is where the story truly spirals into the realm of the extraordinary. The tale claims that the stones, which were initially dismissed as simple prehistoric artifacts and stored away in various museums, were re-examined in 1962 by a Russian scientist named Dr. Vyacheslav Sazev. It was he who reportedly made the claim that would electrify the world of UFO enthusiasts. Upon close inspection, he found that each disc had a continuous, microscopic spiral groove that ran from the rim to the central hole. Closer still, under powerful magnification, this groove was said to be not a tool mark at all, but a continuous line of tiny, meticulously carved hieroglyphic characters, a writing system so small it was invisible to the naked eye. The story goes that linguists eventually managed to decipher this ancient text, and its message was nothing short of earth-shattering. It told the story of a spacecraft from a distant star that crashed in the Bayan Kara Ula Mountains thousands of years ago. The survivors, who called themselves the Dropa, were unable to repair their ship and found themselves stranded on Earth. The local Ham tribespeople initially feared and hunted these strange-looking beings, but eventually the two groups made peace. The text on the stones was supposedly the tragic historical record of this stranded alien tribe. This narrative is an incredibly seductive one, weaving together ancient astronauts, a lost history, and tangible physical evidence. It suggests that we have in our possession not just vague cave paintings or myths, but a direct first-person account of an extraterrestrial visitation etched in stone. Unsurprisingly, this story has been a cornerstone of ancient astronaut theory for decades, held up as potential proof that our planet was visited in the distant past. However, when subjected to the rigorous scrutiny of mainstream archaeology and historical research, the entire edifice of the Dropa Stones story begins to crumble. The first and most significant problem is a complete lack of verifiable evidence. No reputable archaeological journal has ever published a peer-reviewed paper by a Professor Kai Pute detailing this find. The Russian scientist Dr. Sazev is an obscure figure whose research, if it ever existed, never appeared in any recognized scientific publication. The Dropa stones themselves have vanished entirely. Despite claims that hundreds were found, not a single one has ever been produced for independent analysis by a major museum or university. There are no clear photographs of the stones with visible writing, no casts or molds, and no credible chain of custody tracing them from the cave to a modern institution. Linguists and historians point out further flaws. The Bayan Kara Ula region is home to a real ethnic group known as the Dropka, who are nomadic Tibetan herders. Their name, in their own language, simply means solitary or alone, a perfectly logical name for people living in a remote mountainous area. There is also a real documented people in China, the Han, who have sometimes been referred to as the Ham in older texts. It seems highly probable that the entire elaborate story is a fabricated pastiche, a work of fiction that took these real names and wove them into an imaginary galactic drama. The most widely accepted explanation from skeptics is that the entire Dropa Stones narrative is a classic urban legend, a piece of mid-20th century folklore that emerged from the growing global fascination with flying saucers and ancient mysteries. It may have originated from a fictional story in a magazine that was later mistaken for fact, or been an elaborate hoax that took on a life of its own through retellings in sensationalist books. Yet, even with its credibility thoroughly dismantled by experts, the legend of the Dropa Stones refuses to die. Its enduring power lies in its potent ingredients, a remote, mysterious location, an official-sounding scientific discovery, and a narrative that provides a simple, tangible answer to the profound question of whether we are alone in the universe. It offers the fantasy of a smoking gun artifact, a stone record that could definitively prove an incredible chapter of human history. The story persists because it fulfills a deep human desire for connection to the cosmos and for answers that are more thrilling than the slow, meticulous, and often ambiguous work of real archaeology. The Dropa Stones, whether they ever existed as described, serve as a powerful cultural artifact in their own right, not of an ancient alien crash, but of our modern yearning to believe that such incredible things are not only possible, but that their evidence is waiting just out of sight, hidden in a cave, for someone to finally uncover the truth. Yet the most profound mystery of Göbekli Tepe lies not in its construction but in its intentional burial. Around 8000 BCE, for reasons we can only guess, the people who used this incredible complex decided to walk away from it. But they didn't just abandon it, they meticulously and deliberately buried every single structure under tons of earth, effectively preserving it in a time capsule for millennia. This was not the result of a sudden disaster or slow siltation. It was a deliberate, enormous undertaking. The why behind this act is perhaps the site's ultimate enigma. Some archaeologists theorize it was a ritual act of decommissioning, a way to retire a sacred space with honor, perhaps because their beliefs or social structures were changing. Others suggest that the knowledge required to maintain the structures, or the societal organization that built them, had already begun to fragment. Burying it may have been a way to protect their most sacred site from desecration by newcomers or simply from the passage of time. This deliberate concealment is what saved the pillars from being quarried for later buildings and allowed the carvings to remain so crisp, but it also erased this entire chapter of human achievement from history until the modern era. The burial of Göbekli Tepe is a silent, powerful testament to a moment of profound cultural shift, a conscious closing of one door even as humanity was on the verge of opening another, the door to the agricultural world we now inhabit. This site doesn't just challenge our timeline, it forces us to confront the complexity of our ancestors' spiritual lives and the haunting possibility that the very dawn of civilization was sparked not by practicality, but by a deep, shared, and monumental act of faith. Moving from the grand, deliberately buried architecture of Göbekli Tepe, we now turn our attention to a much smaller, yet no less contentious artifact, a single silver coin that has ignited a fiery debate about who first reached the Americas. In 1957, amateur archaeologist Guy Melgren was excavating the remains of a prehistoric Native American settlement at the Goddard site on the central coast of Maine. Amidst the typical finds of stone tools and pottery fragments, he unearthed something that seemed utterly out of place, a small, worn silver coin. Initially, it was tentatively identified as a British coin from the 12th century and filed away. It wasn't until nearly a decade later, in 1974, that a curator at the Maine State Museum took a much closer look. The coin was sent to experts at the British Museum, who delivered a stunning verdict. This was no English penny, it was a Norse silver penny, a genuine Viking artifact minted between 1065 and 1080 during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre in Norway. The implications were seismic. If authentic and found in its original context, this tiny coin could be the first and only pre-Columbian Norse artifact found within the United States, suggesting Viking explorers ventured far further south than their known settlements in Newfoundland. The evidence supporting the coin's authenticity as a genuine Norse artifact is actually quite strong. Numismatic experts at the British Museum confirmed its legitimacy. The design, metal composition, and style are unquestionably from 11th century Norway. The debate, therefore, does not center on whether the coin itself is a fake, but on how it arrived at a 12th century Native American site in Maine. There are two primary and fiercely opposed explanations for its presence. The first and most thrilling theory is that it is direct evidence of Norse exploration and trade. We know from the sagas and the archaeological site at Elance Orks Meadows in Newfoundland that the Vikings, led by Leif Erikson, established a foothold in North America around the year 1000. Proponents of this theory argue it is entirely plausible that Viking ships, sailing down the coast in search of resources like timber or grapes, made contact with the native Penobscot people at the Goddard site. The coin could have been lost during trade, or perhaps it was an item of curiosity that changed hands between cultures. This would rewrite the map of Viking exploration, pushing their known range hundreds of miles further down the North American coastline. However, the second and more widely accepted theory within mainstream archaeology offers a much more mundane explanation. The Goddard site was a major trading hub for the Native Americans in the region, with a network that stretched for thousands of miles. Artifacts from distant indigenous cultures have been found there. Critics of the Norse contact theory point out that the coin was found not in a sealed, undisturbed layer from the 1200s, but in a pit that also contained artifacts from the much later 17th and even 19th centuries. This mixing of layers suggests the possibility of contamination. The most plausible conventional explanation is that the coin was brought to the area much later by a European settler or fisherman, perhaps in the 16 or 1700s, and was either lost or traded to the Native Americans at that time. It then simply worked its way down into older layers of the site over centuries. It could have been carried in a pocket, fallen through floorboards of a later colonial building, or even been part of a collection belonging to a settler that was later acquired by native inhabitants. In this scenario, the Maine penny is still a fascinating historical object, but it tells a story of later colonial era contact, not a pre-Columbian Viking voyage. The controversy surrounding the main penny perfectly encapsulates the immense difficulty of interpreting a single, anomalous find. For those who want to believe in a wider Norse exploration of America, the coin is a tantalizing clue, a physical piece of evidence that seems to corroborate the saga's hints of travels to a land they called Vinland. It represents the possibility that the history we know is still incomplete, with chapters waiting to be rediscovered. For the scientific community, however, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and a single coin with a questionable archaeological context is simply not enough to overturn the established narrative. Without corroborating evidence from the site like Norse tools, structures, or DNA evidence, the coin remains an intriguing outlier, an anomaly that is more likely explained by modern intrusion than ancient exploration. It sits in the main State Museum today, labeled as probably authentic, but for every discovery like the main penny that fits into a known, if debated, historical framework, another emerges that seems to defy all conventional explanation. Our journey now takes us to the remote and desolate heights of Mount Baigong in China's Qinghai province, a place so harsh and isolated it was long considered utterly uninhabitable. It was here in the late 1990s that reports began to surface of a truly baffling find. Explorers and a subsequent government survey team discovered what appeared to be a pyramid-shaped mountain, and within its crumbling interior, 3 triangular cave entrances. The largest of these caves, stretching nearly 200 feet into the mountain, contained an arrangement of features that looked anything but natural. Dozens of iron pipes, varying in diameter from mere toothpick size to nearly 16 inches across, were found protruding from the cave walls and floor, running deep into the mountain and emerging at the summit. Even more strangely, a similar network of rusted iron pipes was found buried in the nearby saltwater Lake Tossin, and more still scattered across the barren shoreline. The immediate and obvious question was who or what could have installed a complex system of metal pipes in this remote wilderness, and for what possible purpose. The initial dating of these pipes only deepened the mystery. When samples were analyzed at a local smelter, the results were staggering. The pipes were reported to be about 30% iron oxide, along with a significant amount of silicon dioxide and calcium oxide. But it was the age that sent shockwaves through those who heard the story. The smelter's analysis suggested the pipes were smelted over 150,000 years ago. This date is so profoundly ancient that it places the pipes in a time when, according to mainstream science, Homo sapiens were just beginning their journey out of Africa, and no human culture on Earth had even begun to develop basic agriculture, let alone advanced metallurgy. The very existence of such artifacts would not just rewrite history, it would completely obliterate our understanding of human technological development. The location adds another layer of intrigue. The Qinghai province is a sparsely populated region, historically home to nomadic herdsmen, with no archaeological record of any ancient industrial society capable of such sophisticated metalwork. The pipes seem to appear out of nowhere, a technological ghost in a landscape that has never supported a civilization capable of creating them. Faced with such an extraordinary claim, scientists began searching for a more conventional geological explanation. The most widely accepted theory today is that the so-called pipes are not artificial constructs at all, but incredibly well-formed examples of a natural phenomenon known as iron oxide concretions. Over vast stretches of time, in the right mineral-rich conditions, groundwater can seep through sandstone, dissolving iron and other minerals. This mineral-rich water can then precipitate out, forming rinds or tubes of iron oxide around a central core, which is often the path of a tree root or a small animal burrow. As the softer sandstone around these hardened iron formations erodes away over millennia, the more resistant iron tubes are left behind, often appearing in eerily straight lines or organized clusters that can perfectly mimic manufactured pipes. This process, while rare, is documented in other parts of the world. most famously at Colorado's Joshua Tree National Park. Proponents of this theory argue that the unique geological conditions around Mount Bagong, with its rich iron deposits and ancient history of water activity, created a perfect natural foundry for these bizarre formations. The varying sizes and the fact they are found in both the mountain and the lake could be explained by different erosion patterns and the widespread nature of the mineral-rich groundwater flow. However, for those who believe the pipes are genuine artifacts, the geological explanation fails to account for several key details. They point to the clear and organized triangular arrangement of the cave entrances, which seems highly architectural. Furthermore, analysis by the Beijing Institute of Geology reportedly found organic plant material inside some of the pipes, and when dated, this material was allegedly only a few thousand years old, not hundreds of thousands, directly contradicting the earlier smelters report and suggesting a far more recent, though still ancient, origin. Some researchers also note the presence of what appear to be manufactured features like rivets and seams on some pipe fragments, though these claims are heavily disputed. The most speculative theory, of course, is that the pipes are evidence of a prehistoric advanced civilization, perhaps even an extraterrestrial one, that used the site as some kind of facility, with the pipes serving as a plumbing or ventilation system for a base that has long since vanished, leaving only these rusted fragments behind. The debate over the Bagong pipes remains at a stalemate, largely due to the site's extreme inaccessibility and the lack of extensive, peer-reviewed archaeological excavation. It exists in a hazy realm of anecdotal reports, disputed analyses, and incredible photographs. They represent the ultimate challenge of distinguishing a true ancient anomaly from a breathtaking geological simulacrum. Whether they are the fossilized remains of a long-vanished industrial complex or simply a magnificent trick of nature, the Bagong pipes force us to confront the limits of our perception. They remind us that our planet is capable of producing forms of such stunning regularity and complexity that they can perfectly mirror the works of human hands, blurring the line between the natural world and the artifice of intelligence, and leaving us to wonder if we are truly the first builders on this earth. Tucked away in a suburban garden in Scotland lies a 5,000-year-old canvas of breathtaking complexity, one that rivals the most famous prehistoric art in the world, yet remains almost entirely unknown to the public. This is the Costa stone, a massive sandstone slab measuring over 42 feet across and etched with more than 90 deeply carved symbols. Its surface is a dense tapestry of swirling concentric circles, some with radiating lines, intricate spirals that seem to pulse with energy, and countless small hemispherical depressions known as cup marks. This is not random scratching, it is a masterpiece of Neolithic artistry, a deliberate and painstakingly created composition that has mystified researchers since its modern rediscovery in the late 19th century. The sheer density of the motifs is overwhelming, a visual language without a key, a message from the depths of prehistory that we can see but cannot read. The stone's modern story began in 1887 when the Reverend James Harvey stumbled upon it, largely buried under turf near Clydebank. It caused an immediate sensation in archaeological circles, but the full scope of its complexity wasn't understood until the 1960s, when archaeologist Ludovic McClellan fully excavated it. For a brief period, the stone was open to the public, but this exposure led to its greatest threat: modern vandalism. People began adding their own carvings and names to the ancient surface, forcing the difficult decision to protect the stone by reburying it in 1965, where it lay hidden for over half a century. It wasn't until 2015 that a team from the University of Glasgow, using modern digital mapping technology, carefully exhumed it once more to create a high-resolution, three-dimensional record of every groove and mark. This act preserved the stone's secrets digitally before it was once again returned to the earth for its own protection, a silent guardian of a lost world. So what do these mesmerizing patterns mean? the theories are as varied and intricate as the carvings themselves. One of the most compelling ideas is that the Costa stone is a sophisticated astronomical map. Some researchers have noted that the arrangement of the cups and rings could correspond to the positions of stars or constellations, or perhaps chart significant lunar and solar events like eclipses or solstices. The spirals might represent the cyclical nature of time, the seasons, or the journey of celestial bodies across the heavens. In this interpretation, the stone was not art for art's sake. It was a functional cosmological model, a way for a Neolithic community to understand and predict the movements of the cosmos that governed their lives. A different perspective views the stone through a spiritual or ritual lens. The cup marks, which are found at thousands of sites across Atlantic Europe, are often linked to concepts of fertility, life force, or votive offerings. It's possible that liquids like water, blood, or milk were poured into these cups as part of ceremonies, perhaps as offerings to deities or ancestors. The intricate labyrinths of rings and grooves might then represent pathways for spirits, maps of the underworld, or symbolic depictions of altered states of consciousness achieved through ritual or trance. The stone could have been the focal point of a sacred landscape, a place where the community gathered for ceremonies that connected them to the spiritual realm and to the very rock beneath their feet. Other theories are even more speculative. Some suggest the patterns are territorial markers, denoting the land and resources belonging to a specific clan or family, with the complexity of the design signaling their status and power. There's even a fringe idea that the carvings are a primitive form of writing or a system of musical notation, though no consistent grammar or syntax has been identified. The frustrating and beautiful truth is that without any written records from the people who created it, the Costa stone's true meaning is locked away. We can analyze the patterns statistically, compare them to other sites, and develop compelling hypotheses, but we can never truly know the thoughts and intentions of the artist who knelt on that stone 5 millennia ago, patiently pecking out these eternal symbols with a simple stone tool. It stands as a profound reminder that some of the most eloquent voices from the past speak in a language we have simply forgotten how to hear. Buried deep beneath the quiet Chinese village of Longyu, a secret of staggering proportion lay hidden for centuries beneath the murky waters of fish ponds. It was in 1992 when a curious local farmer named Wu Anai decided to pump the water out of one such pond that this secret was finally revealed. Expecting to find a small, natural cave, he and his neighbors instead uncovered the entrance to an immense, hand-carved underground world. What they found was not a simple cavern, but a vast, breathtaking grotto with soaring ceilings, massive pillars, and walls covered in meticulously carved parallel chisel marks. This was just the beginning. Eventually, 24 of these grottos were discovered, each an architectural marvel carved from solid, brittle siltstone. The scale of the undertaking is almost beyond comprehension. The total excavated volume is estimated at nearly 1 million cubic meters of rock. To put that in perspective, if that amount of rubble were piled together, it would form a mountain. And yet, despite this monumental effort, there is not a single historical record, scroll, or local legend that mentions their construction, their purpose, or the army of workers that must have been required to build them. The engineering precision inside these caverns is what truly defies belief. The largest of the grottos, known as the Underground Palace, covers an area of over 12,000 square meters, with ceilings reaching heights of 100 feet. The walls are not simply rough-hewn rock, they are carved at a consistent, precise 75-degree angle. The roofs are flat and supported by massive, evenly spaced pillars that show a sophisticated understanding of load distribution to prevent collapse. But the most baffling feature is the carving itself. Every single surface, walls, pillars, and ceilings is covered in a uniform series of parallel chisel marks, all running in the same direction with a stunning consistency in their spacing and depth. This isn't just functional digging, it is a deliberate, decorative finishing technique applied to every inch of these colossal spaces. The effect is a powerful, rhythmic pattern that transforms the entire underground complex into a work of art, but it also represents an incalculable amount of additional, seemingly unnecessary labor. Why go to such extreme lengths to decorate the walls of a quarry or a mine? This question lies at the heart of the Longyu mystery, pointing toward a purpose far more significant than mere resource extraction. How ancient workers achieved this precision without modern lasers, blueprints, or measurement tools is a puzzle that has stumped engineers. The alignment of the pillars, the consistency of the angles, and the sheer symmetry across such vast spaces would be a challenge even with contemporary technology. One theory suggests the builders may have used a system of advanced string lines and water levels to maintain their benchmarks, but the exact methods remain unknown. The logistical challenges are equally daunting. Removing nearly 1 million cubic meters of stone would have required the labor of thousands of workers toiling for decades, if not generations. Where did all this rubble go? Not a single trace of this immense amount of spoil has ever been found in the surrounding area. It simply vanished, adding another layer of profound mystery to the project. The complete absence of any historical record is perhaps the most telling clue. In China, a civilization with a meticulous tradition of documenting great imperial projects, the silence is deafening. There are no mentions of a massive underground excavation in Longyu, no records of a workforce being assembled, no accounts of a project being completed or abandoned. This has led to intense speculation about the grotto's purpose. Were they the hidden tombs of emperors? No artifacts or burial remains have ever been found. Were they a secret imperial mining operation? The decorative finishing makes this highly unlikely, as does the fact that the specific type of stone has little commercial value. Some more speculative theories suggest they were sacred spaces for ritual or even temporary barracks for troops, though the lack of soot from torches or any evidence of habitation casts doubt on these ideas. The most compelling possibility is that their purpose was so secret, so sensitive, that its very existence was scrubbed from the official record. The Longyu grottos stand as a monument to a forgotten chapter of history, a project of unimaginable scale and precision whose masters, methods, and ultimate meaning have been completely erased by time, leaving behind only the silent, awe-inspiring evidence of their staggering achievement. While the debate over natural wonders versus ancient artifacts continues around the world, few cases have ignited as much immediate and passionate controversy as the one that emerged from a forest in central Bosnia. In 2005, an amateur archaeologist named Semir Osmanagic announced a discovery that would soon captivate the world and divide the scientific community. He claimed that in the hills surrounding the town of Visoko, he had found not just one but several large spherical stones, and he declared that they were not natural formations but evidence of the world's first ancient pyramids built by a lost civilization over 12,000 years ago. Among these finds, the most visually striking were the so-called Bosnian stone spheres. The largest of these, which he named the Sphere of Podabravlj, was measured at an estimated weight of over 30 tons, with a radius of about 1.2 to 1.5 meters. To Osmanagic and his supporters, these stones were not just rocks. They were meticulously crafted artifacts, proof of a highly advanced prehistoric culture in Europe that possessed sophisticated technology and geometric knowledge. The claims were extraordinary and, for many, incredibly seductive. Osmanagic proposed that these spheres were made from a material called conglomerate, a type of sedimentary rock, and argued that their near-perfect shape and smooth surface could only be the result of human hands. He suggested that this ancient civilization used a combination of mechanical and perhaps even mystical methods to shape the stone, achieving a level of precision that rivaled the famous stone spheres of Costa Rica. For the local community and an international audience eager for evidence of lost history, the discovery was a source of immense pride and fascination. It promised to put Bosnia on the archaeological map in a revolutionary way, suggesting that the Balkans were home to a culture of pyramid builders long before those of Egypt or Mesoamerica. The sphere became a symbol of this grand narrative, a tangible piece of a puzzle that threatened to rewrite the history books. However, the reaction from the global scientific and geological community was swift and overwhelmingly skeptical. Geologists who examined the site and the stones offered a much more conventional, albeit less glamorous, explanation. They identified the spheres as excellent examples of a very common natural geological process known as concretion. In this process, minerals precipitate from groundwater and cement sedimentary grains together, often forming hard, spherical nodules within softer surrounding rock. Over millions of years, erosion can wear away the softer outer material, leaving these harder, rounded concretions exposed. This process is observed all over the world, creating spherical stones from the massive Kautu boulders on New Zealand's beaches to the smaller Moeraki boulders. The geologists pointed out that the stone in the Bosnian hills was indeed conglomerate, a perfect host for such concretions to form. They argued that the sphere's shape and apparent smoothness were entirely consistent with this natural phenomenon, requiring no human intervention whatsoever. The debate quickly escalated beyond academic discussion into a fierce public and media battle. Critics accused Osman Nagic of promoting pseudo-archaeology, of seeing patterns and intentions in entirely natural formations. They expressed serious concern that his excavations, which involved heavy machinery to uncover what he believed were pyramids, were actually damaging genuine medieval and Roman archaeological sites in the Visoko Valley. Mainstream archaeologists from institutions across Europe condemned the project, with the European Association of Archaeologists issuing a public statement warning that the claims were not based on sound scientific methodology. For them, the sphere was a textbook example of pareidolia, the human tendency to see meaningful shapes, like faces or perfect forms, in random natural patterns. Yet the story of the Bosnian stone spheres is about more than just geology. It's a powerful case study in the human relationship with the past. Why did this particular claim resonate so deeply? For a post-war Bosnia, the narrative of a glorious, ancient, and advanced civilization was a powerful source of national pride and a welcome distraction from recent trauma. It attracted tourists, media attention, and investment to the region. On a broader level, the theory taps into a deep and enduring public desire to believe in lost golden ages and advanced ancient knowledge, a narrative that is often more compelling than the slow, meticulous, and complex story revealed by mainstream science. The sphere became a Rorschach test. Some looked at it and saw undeniable proof of a forgotten world, while others saw a perfectly ordinary rock. This intense controversy highlights the fundamental challenge archaeology faces in the modern era, balancing open-minded investigation with rigorous scientific scrutiny and navigating the often blurry line between passionate amateur enthusiasm and established academic practice. The sphere itself remains in its forest, a silent witness to the fact that sometimes the most mysterious thing about an ancient object is not its origin, but the powerful stories we choose to tell about it. Far from the disputed hills of Bosnia, in the private collection of a Colombian professor, rests a small, dark stone object that seems to defy the very timeline of biological knowledge. Known as the genetic disc, this artifact is carved from a single piece of lyddite, a hard, black stone similar to shale. Measuring roughly 22 centimeters in diameter and weighing just over 2 kilograms, it would be an unassuming piece were it not for the incredibly detailed and specific carvings that cover both of its faces. These are not abstract patterns or mythological scenes. They are clear, precise, and shockingly modern-looking biological diagrams. One side depicts the entire process of human fetal development, from a fertilized egg to a nearly full-term baby, showing the various stages with an accuracy that would be right at home in a contemporary medical textbook. The other side shows detailed carvings of a human sperm cell, an egg cell being fertilized, and various other biological forms that are only visible through a microscope. The immediate and profound problem is the disk's alleged age. While its exact provenance is murky, it is attributed to the pre-Columbian cultures of Colombia, potentially making it over 6,000 years old, a time when, according to conventional history, humanity had no concept of cells, sperm, or the stages of embryonic growth. The carvings are so anatomically correct that they have become the central pillar of the artifact's mystery. How could an ancient culture have observed and recorded details that require magnification to see? Proponents of the disk's authenticity point to this precision as undeniable proof of advanced, lost knowledge. They theorize that a sophisticated civilization, perhaps one that predates all known major cultures, possessed a level of scientific understanding that rivaled our own. This knowledge could have been acquired through means we can scarcely imagine, perhaps an intuitive grasp of biology developed over millennia, or even, as some more speculative theories suggest, guidance from an external, advanced source. The disk, in this view, is not a standalone oddity but a fragment of a much larger scientific tradition, a single-page textbook from a curriculum that was otherwise completely lost to time. The fact that it is made of durable stone, unlike perishable papyrus or parchment, might explain why it alone survived when all other records vanished. However, the scientific and archaeological communities approach the genetic disk with extreme caution and for compelling reasons. The primary issue is its complete lack of a secure archaeological context. The disk was not discovered during a controlled, documented excavation by professional archaeologists. It was found by a collector and later acquired by Professor Jaime Gutierrez Lega, who has amassed a large collection of similar anomalous stone objects. Without a known burial site, associated artifacts, or any way to perform stratigraphic dating, there is no verifiable way to confirm its age. This opens the door wide to the possibility of a modern hoax. Skeptics argue that the disk is a masterful example of pseudo-archaeology, skillfully crafted in the 20th century to appeal to those fascinated by ancient mysteries and lost civilizations. The creator, whoever they may be, would have needed only a basic understanding of modern biology to create the designs, carving them into an old piece of stone to give the illusion of antiquity. The choice of lyddite is also telling. While hard, it is not impossible for a modern artisan with tungsten carbide tools to carve, especially if the goal was to create a sensation rather than a genuine ancient artifact. The debate ultimately hinges on a battle between the object's appearance and its provenance. Its imagery is undoubtedly startling, but in archaeology, context is everything. An object without a secure find site is like a word without a sentence. Its true meaning is incredibly difficult to discern. The genetic disk exists in an epistemological void, a space where compelling visual evidence clashes with a complete absence of archaeological verification. It serves as a powerful Rorschach test for how we view the past. For some, it is a smoking gun that proves our history is wrong and that we need to dramatically rethink human development. For others, it is a classic warning tale about the dangers of basing historical claims on private collections and unverified artifacts. It reminds us that the allure of a paradigm-shattering discovery can sometimes override the strict, often slow-moving, standards of evidence required by science. Whether a genuine message from a forgotten age or an elaborate modern forgery, the genetic disk continues to captivate because it speaks directly to our deepest curiosity about the limits of ancient knowledge and the tantalizing possibility that we are not the first to peer into the microscopic building blocks of life itself. Yet another metallic mystery emerges not from a cave or a desert, but from the sandy banks of the Mureș River in Romania. In 1974, construction workers digging a trench about 30 feet deep unearthed a collection of ancient bones alongside a most peculiar object. The bones were quickly identified as belonging to an extinct mastodon, a creature that roamed the earth tens of thousands of years ago. Buried in the same layer was a heavy, wedge-shaped piece of metal, heavily corroded and covered in a thick black patina. Initially dismissed as perhaps a modern tool, the object was set aside with the bones and largely forgotten for nearly a decade. It wasn't until someone decided to clean it that its true, baffling nature was revealed. Underneath the crusty exterior was a lightweight, silvery metal. Samples were sent for analysis to two separate laboratories, one in Lausanne, Switzerland, and another in Romania. The results were identical and utterly shocking. The object was composed of an alloy, predominantly aluminum, with traces of copper, zinc, lead, cadmium, nickel, and other elements. This composition alone would be unremarkable for a modern industrial part, but the context of its discovery was the thing that shattered all conventional understanding. This artifact, now known as the Ayod object or the aluminum wedge, was found in a layer of earth dated to between 11,000 and 20,000 years old, a time when humanity was living in the Stone Age, mastering flint tools, and had no knowledge whatsoever of metal smelting, let alone the incredibly complex industrial process required to produce pure aluminum. The core of the mystery lies in the history of aluminum itself. While it is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, it is never found in its pure metallic form in nature. It is always bonded with other elements, forming compounds like alumina. Isolating pure aluminum requires a highly sophisticated and energy-intensive industrial process called electrolysis. It wasn't until 1825 that the metal was first isolated, and it wasn't produced in any significant quantity until 1886. The idea that an object made of a refined aluminum alloy could exist 20,000 years ago is, according to everything we know about human technological development, an absolute impossibility. The metallurgical analysis added further layers of intrigue. The specific alloy and the thick layer of aluminum oxide that encased it suggested it had been manufactured, not naturally formed. The pattern of corrosion also indicated an immense age, consistent with its burial alongside Pleistocene-era megafauna. For those who accept the original find context as genuine, the Ayod object is one of the most powerful pieces of evidence for the theory of a lost advanced civilization or even prehistoric extraterrestrial contact. Skeptics, however, have proposed several more conventional explanations. The most widely accepted theory is that the object is simply a much more modern piece of machinery that somehow intruded into the ancient layer. It could have been part of a digging apparatus from a previous excavation or a piece of heavy equipment from World War II, perhaps a tooth from a bulldozer bucket or a component from an aircraft that crashed during the war. Over time, it could have sunk down through the soil through a process of bioturbation, where animal burrowing or root growth pushes objects into deeper, older layers, creating a false archaeological context. This is a well-documented phenomenon that has confused the dating of other finds. Another theory suggests it might be a fragment of a Soviet satellite or rocket that fell to Earth, though this doesn't fully align with the reported depth of its discovery or the initial corrosion analysis. The debate over the Ayod object perfectly encapsulates the conflict between an extraordinary artifact and the lack of rigorous archaeological documentation at the moment of its discovery. Without photographs of it in situ, precise stratigraphic notes, or its immediate analysis by a trained archaeologist, we are left with a story and a physical object whose provenience will always be in doubt. It sits today in the History Museum of Transylvania in Cluj-Napoca, Romania, with a label that simply describes it as an object of unknown origin, a quiet but potent symbol of the gaps in our historical narrative. Whether it is a misplaced piece of modern machinery or a genuine relic from a forgotten age of high technology, the Ayod object serves as a permanent reminder that the soil beneath our feet may still hold secrets that challenge the very foundations of our story. But this serene picture of a planned paradise is shattered by a grim and haunting discovery. Scattered throughout the city's final layers, archaeologists unearthed human skeletons, not in proper graves but lying in the streets, in homes and in crowded groups, many in poses of sudden, agonizing death. One cluster was found in a small room, huddled together as if seeking last-minute refuge. Another skeleton was found face down in a street, its arms outstretched. A family of 9 was discovered together, all struck down simultaneously. These were not the remains of a society that experienced a slow decline. They pointed to a single, swift, and catastrophic endpoint. But it was the condition of these remains that deepened the mystery. Some of the skeletons showed signs of extreme, rapid heating, with bones vitrified, a process where intense heat fuses the crystalline structure, essentially turning them partially to glass. This level of thermal exposure is not typical of conventional fires or even volcanic activity. Furthermore, early reports from the site, though later debated, described radiation levels in the area that were significantly higher than normal background levels. This bizarre combination of evidence, the sudden deaths, the vitrified bones, and the anomalous radiation, opened the door to a theory so radical it seems ripped from science fiction: the possibility of an ancient atomic catastrophe. Mainstream archaeology has worked diligently to provide more conventional explanations for Mohenjo-Daro's demise. The most widely accepted theory points to a repeated and devastating pattern of invasion by nomadic Indo-European tribes known as the Aryans, who swept into the Indian subcontinent around this time. The skeletons in this view are the victims of a brutal final sacking of the city. The signs of burning could be attributed to invaders torching the buildings. However, critics of this theory note a puzzling lack of supporting evidence. Where are the weapons? The city shows no signs of a prolonged siege, fortified battlements, or the kind of mass weapon trauma on the skeletons that would be expected from a major military conflict. The violence seems to have been sudden and overwhelming, but not necessarily martial in nature. Another plausible explanation involves a sudden and catastrophic natural disaster, such as a massive river flood or a tectonic event. The Indus River, the city's lifeblood, could have become its executioner through a freak, unprecedented flood that trapped and drowned the inhabitants. Yet, this doesn't neatly account for the intense, localized heat effects on the bones. A third theory suggests a deadly pandemic, a swift-acting disease that cut down the population too quickly for proper burials. But diseases do not vitrify bones or leave behind elevated radiation levels. Each conventional theory explains one piece of the puzzle but struggles to account for the entire unsettling picture. This failure of standard models to provide a complete answer is what gives the most speculative theory its persistent allure. First proposed in the 1970s by author David Davenport, the ancient nuclear war hypothesis suggests that the city was destroyed by a powerful, explosive event that released intense thermal energy and radiation. Davenport drew parallels between the descriptions of the ruins and the effects witnessed at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, noting the vitrified stone and the apparent pattern of epicentral destruction. He even pointed to ancient Indian texts like the Mahabharata, which contain startlingly vivid descriptions of weapons that sound eerily like modern ordnance, speaking of a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death which reduced to ashes the entire race of the Vrishnis and the Andhokas. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. The text recounts their hair and nails fell out, pottery broke without cause, and the birds turned white. This description mirrors the symptoms of acute radiation poisoning. For proponents, Mohenjo-Daro is not just a ruined city. It is physical evidence that these texts are not mythology but a distorted memory of a real, technologically advanced and horrifically destructive war in the deep past. The scientific community universally rejects this interpretation, citing the complete lack of any physical evidence for such technology elsewhere in the archaeological record. and the fact that the vitrified stone could be explained by a massive petroleum-fed fire, as the region has natural gas vents. The elevated radiation claims are also heavily disputed, with many scientists arguing the readings were misinterpreted or the result of natural mineral deposits. Yet the mystery of the skeletons in the streets remains. Their final postures tell a story of a community caught utterly by surprise, frozen in a moment of unimaginable terror. Whether the cause was a human army, a furious act of nature, or something far more strange and lost to history, Mohenjo-Daro stands as a silent, sobering monument to the fragility of even the greatest civilizations. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that our understanding of this sophisticated culture is incomplete, and that its final chapter may contain a secret more terrifying than we had ever imagined. Carved into the stone walls of a crypt deep within the ancient Egyptian temple of Hathor at Dendera is a relief that has become a lightning rod for controversy. At first glance, it appears to show a surreal and fantastical scene. A large, ovate bulb pointed at both ends with a snake-like wavy line stretching through its center. This bulb is held aloft on a supporting pillar that resembles an insulating pole, and from its base trails a cable that seems to plug into a box upon which an Egyptian god is resting. To many who see it, the resemblance to a modern, oversized light bulb is uncanny and immediately sparks a tantalizing question. Could this be evidence that the ancient Egyptians possessed some form of electrical lighting technology? This interpretation, often called the Dendera light bulb theory, suggests that the relief is a literal diagram of advanced technological knowledge. Proponents argue that the bulb-shaped object represents a glass vacuum tube, the snake inside is a filament, the pillar is an insulator, the trailing cable is a wire, and the box at the base is a power source, perhaps a primitive battery akin to the disputed Baghdad Battery. They point to the absence of soot in many deep, intricate tomb interiors as potential supporting evidence, asking how such detailed artwork could have been accomplished in total darkness with only flickering, smoke-producing torches or oil lamps. For them, the relief is a clear-cut schematic, a piece of lost engineering knowledge preserved in stone by ancient artisans. Mainstream Egyptology, however, offers a profoundly different and symbolically rich interpretation that is deeply rooted in well-understood Egyptian mythology. Scholars identify the scene not as a technical diagram, but as a representation of a foundational creation myth. The bulb is not a light bulb at all, but a depiction of a lotus flower from which the sun god, in his form as a snake, is being born. This is a visual representation of a moment from Egyptian cosmogony. The snake is the deity Harsomptus, a manifestation of the sun, emerging from the primordial waters represented by the lotus. The cable is not an electrical wire but a stylized umbilical cord connecting the newborn god to the box, which is actually a jed pillar, a powerful symbol of stability and the backbone of the god Osiris. The entire scene is about divine birth, cosmic order, and the cyclical renewal of the sun, not the operation of a machine. The surrounding panels in the crypt provide the essential context that firmly supports the mythological reading. They show similar scenes with other gods associated with creation and renewal, all part of a coherent narrative program about the dawn of time and the power of the gods. The wavy snake is a common hieroglyphic symbol for God and is frequently shown in similar contexts related to divinity and power. To interpret this single image outside of this dense mythological framework is, from an Egyptological perspective, to misunderstand the entire symbolic language of ancient Egyptian religion. The Egyptians were masters of symbolic art, and their imagery was meant to convey spiritual and cosmic truths, not technical manuals. Yet the debate persists with remarkable vigor. Why does this particular carving continue to fuel such intense speculation? The answer lies in the powerful collision between our modern worldview and that of the ancient world. We live in an age defined by technology. We instinctively interpret complex images through a lens of engineering and functionality. The ancient Egyptians lived in an age defined by myth and symbol. Their lens was one of spiritual meaning and cosmic interconnection. The Dendera relief becomes a Rorschach test. Some look at it and see a filament and a power source. Others look at the same lines and see a god being born from a lotus flower. It captivates us because it presents an image that is just familiar enough to be jarring, yet is embedded in a context that is utterly alien. It challenges us to set aside our own assumptions and truly engage with the ancient Egyptian mind, a task that is as difficult as it is fascinating. The temple walls at Dendera do not hold a secret of forgotten technology, but they do hold a secret, the key to understanding a way of seeing the universe that is profoundly and beautifully different from our own. While the idea of an ancient light bulb in Egypt sparks the imagination, our next discovery transports us to a very different setting, a muddy farm field in the heart of 19th century America, where a simple act of tree clearing would ignite one of history's most passionate and enduring archaeological debates. In the year 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Öhman was laboring on his land near the small town of Kensington, Minnesota. As he and his son worked to clear trees from a hillock, they uprooted a large aspen, its roots tightly gripping a heavy, flat stone. When they pulled it free and wiped away the soil, they were met with an astonishing sight. The stone was covered in intricate carvings of a style they had never seen before. Olof, likely thinking it was some kind of Native American artifact, initially used it as a stepping stone in his shed. It was only later, when a local schoolteacher saw it, that its potential significance was realized. The carvings weren't indigenous symbols, they were runes. This was the Kensington runestone, and its message, if genuine, promised to shatter the accepted narrative of American history. The inscription on the Greywacke stone tells a dramatic and desperate story. Written in a form of Old Swedish and riddled with unusual linguistic features, it describes a party of 30 Norse and Goth explorers who journeyed far to the west from Vinland. Dated to the year 1362, the text reads as a haunting epitaph: 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland far to the west. We had camped by 2 skerries, 1 day's journey north from this stone. We were out to fish one day. After we came home, we found 10 men red with blood and dead. A VM preserve us from evil, have 10 men by the sea to look after our ship's 14 days journey from this island, year 1362. This single paragraph, carved in stone, suggests that Norse explorers not only reached the interior of North America, but did so over a century after the abandonment of the Elance Ox Meadows settlement in Newfoundland, and a full 130 years before Christopher Columbus was even born. The evidence in favor of the stone's authenticity is compelling to its proponents. They point to the physical weathering of the inscription, arguing that the carving's depth and the wear on the runes indicate great age far predating Öhman's discovery. Geologists have noted the presence of a mineral weathering rind within the carved grooves, a feature that some argue would take centuries to form. Furthermore, the runic alphabet used is a specific, rare variant known as the Deucalion runes, which was not widely studied or understood in late 19th century Minnesota. How, supporters ask, could an uneducated Swedish farmer or any potential hoaxer have possessed the esoteric linguistic knowledge to forge an inscription using such an obscure script, and then embed it with grammatical quirks that would only later be recognized as legitimate features of 14th century Scandinavian language? The case against the stone's authenticity, however, is equally powerful and represents the consensus view of mainstream academics and runologists. Linguists have identified numerous problems with the text. While it contains some archaic elements, it also includes modern Swedish spellings and grammatical constructions that would be anachronistic for the 1300s. The mixture of runic styles and the inclusion of seemingly invented runes are seen as red flags, suggesting a forger was piecing together knowledge from various sources without full understanding. The very content of the message is also suspiciously convenient. It reads less like a genuine historical record and more like a thrilling narrative designed for discovery, complete with a date and a dramatic story of ambush. Skeptics argue that Ehrman, a literate Swede, had the means and the motive. As an immigrant in a community of other Scandinavians, creating an artifact that connected their new homeland to the glorious Viking past could have been a powerful source of local pride and even economic opportunity, putting the small town of Kensington on the map. The debate over the Kensington runestone is more than just an academic quarrel. It is a cultural touchstone that represents the collision between established history and powerful local identity. For the descendants of Scandinavian immigrants in the Midwest, the stone is a point of immense pride, a tangible link to their heritage and a testament to their ancestors' pioneering spirit that predated all others. It has inspired museums, festivals, and a dedicated community of believers who continue to research and defend it. For the archaeological establishment, it remains a classic example of a pseudo-historical artifact, one that fails to meet the rigorous standards of evidence required to overturn a historical paradigm. Without any corroborating archaeological evidence, no Norse tools, no settlement remains, no bodies from the described massacre, the stone stands alone, an outlier without a context. It exists in a permanent state of controversy, a ghost from a past that may or may not be real, forever challenging us to ask where the line falls between a brilliant hoax and a forgotten truth. Stretching out from the seafloor near the remote Japanese island of Yonaguni lies a formation so geometrically perfect, so architecturally imposing, that it forces us to ask a seemingly simple question with profound implications. Are we looking at a masterpiece of nature or the sunken ruins of a forgotten world? Discovered in 1986 by a local diver searching for new hammerhead shark observation points, the Yonaguni Monument is a massive sandstone structure rising from depths of up to 100 feet. Its most striking feature is a giant monolithic platform with stark, near-perfect 90-degree angles, perfectly straight edges, and a series of dizzyingly symmetrical terraces that descend like a grand staircase. There are what appear to be wide, straight passageways, arched entrances, and even two colossal pillars that look like they were placed to support a massive roof. At the summit is a flat, level area that resembles a ritual plaza. The entire complex is immense, measuring roughly 500 feet long, 130 feet wide, and rising 80 feet from the seabed. To the human eye, it looks unmistakably like the ruins of a vast, ancient citadel, submerged in a single, catastrophic event. The case for it being a man-made ruin, potentially the work of a sophisticated prehistoric culture, is built on this overwhelming visual evidence. Proponents, most notably the late marine geologist Professor Masaki Kimura, who dedicated his life to studying the site, point to specific features that seem to defy natural explanation. They highlight a precise circular depression that looks exactly like a carved well, a channel that runs in a perfect straight line for many meters, and a formation that has been nicknamed the Turtle for its striking resemblance to a carved zoomorphic statue. Kimura and his team also identified what they believed to be quarry marks, tooling evidence on the rock faces, and even a carved relief that resembles a human face. If these interpretations are correct, the monument could be a remnant of the legendary lost continent of Mu or another Pacific civilization, swallowed by the ocean at the end of the last ice age as rising sea levels consumed vast stretches of coastal land. The implications are staggering, suggesting a cultural and architectural achievement that predates the pyramids of Egypt by thousands of years. However, the scientific consensus, led by renowned geologist Robert Schoch, who has dived at the site extensively, leans heavily toward a natural origin. They argue that the entire structure is composed of sandstone, a sedimentary rock notoriously susceptible to natural fracturing and erosion. The region is seismically hyperactive, and the regular, powerful earthquakes that shake the area create perfectly straight cracks and fractures in the bedrock through a process called jointing. The strong underwater currents around Yonaguni, laden with sand, then act like a natural sandblaster, eroding along these pre-existing fractures and planes of weakness, which can easily create the remarkably straight edges, right angles, and stepped terraces we see. This process, known as tidal scouring and bioerosion, is a well-documented geological phenomenon. Skeptics point out that the monument is not an isolated anomaly. The entire coastline of Yonaguni is made of the same sandstone and features similar, though less dramatic, stepped formations that are clearly natural. The carved human face and turtle are seen as classic examples of pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar shapes in random patterns. The debate ultimately hinges on a fundamental conflict between pattern recognition and geological process. Our brains are hardwired to see design and intention, especially in forms that mirror our own architecture. Geologists counter that nature, given the right conditions of rock type, tectonic stress, and erosive force, is a master sculptor capable of producing breathtakingly regular and complex forms without any human intervention. The truth may lie somewhere in the tantalizing middle. Perhaps the Yonaguni Formation began as a completely natural structure, but was later modified and used by ancient humans. There is evidence of human habitation on the island dating back thousands of years. Could these ancient people have found this spectacular natural altar and enhanced it, carving steps into the already existing terraces or enlarging passages for their own ritual purposes? This hybrid theory allows for the possibility of a sacred human site without requiring a full-blown, continent-spanning lost civilization. The Yonaguni Monument remains one of the world's most captivating underwater mysteries, a Rorschach test etched in stone at the bottom of the sea. It challenges not only our models of history but the very limits of our perception, forever suspended between the incredible works of nature and the ghostly echo of human hands. Scattered across the rolling hills and grassy plains of Laos Xingquang Plateau lies a landscape that feels less like a natural formation and more like the abandoned warehouse of a race of giants. Here, thousands of massive stone jars, some standing nearly 10 feet tall and weighing several tons, lie in clusters of a few to several hundred, silently dotting the terrain. Carved from hardy sandstone, granite, and occasionally limestone, these megaliths are remarkably uniform in their design, cylindrical in shape with a widened base and an interior that's been meticulously hollowed out. Their sheer number is staggering, with over 90 known sites containing more than 3,000 of these enigmatic vessels. They are the plane of jars, and their silent, stoic presence poses a series of profound questions. Who made them, how did they move them, and perhaps most intriguingly, what were they for? The prevailing theory, supported by archaeological evidence uncovered in and around the jars, points toward a complex funerary purpose. Excavations have revealed a variety of burial practices associated with the sites. Some jars contain human bones, ceramic pots, and glass beads, suggesting they served as primary burial urns. Others are surrounded by pits filled with skeletal remains, indicating the jars might have been markers for underground graves or used in a secondary burial process, where the deceased would be placed inside to decompose before the bones were later collected for final interment elsewhere. This practice, known as excarnation, is still performed by some cultures in the region today. Researchers have also discovered nearby caves that feature signs of cremation, leading to a compelling hypothesis that the entire landscape functioned as a massive, integrated funerary complex. The bodies may have been placed in the jars for an initial stage, then later cremated, with the ashes perhaps even being returned to the jars for permanent keeping. This would make the plane of jars not a random collection of artifacts, but a sacred, organized necropolis, a city of the dead that served a civilization for generations. But which civilization? The mystery of the jar's creators is as dense as the stone they're carved from. Local legend speaks of a powerful king named Kun Cheung who, after a great victory, commanded the jars to be created to hold huge quantities of rice wine for a monumental celebration. While a charming tale, archaeology points to a more somber and ancient origin. Scientific dating of archaeological materials found at the sites, such as ceramic grave goods and charcoal from burial pits, suggests the jars were placed there during the Iron Age between 500 BCE and 500 CE. The people who made them were likely a sophisticated society with complex social organization and ritual beliefs, but they left behind no written records, no grand temples, and no large settlements have been found in the immediate vicinity. Their entire cultural identity has been funneled into this one breathtaking funerary project. We don't know what they called themselves, what language they spoke, or what ultimately happened to them. They are a ghost culture defined almost entirely by their interaction with death and the immense stone vessels they left behind as their only testimony. This leads to one of the most practical and baffling puzzles, the question of logistics. How did these people, without the wheel, without modern pulley systems, and without draft animals, quarry, carve, and transport these multi-ton jars across dozens of miles? The quarries for the sandstone jars have been identified, and in some cases, partially completed jars still lie there, giving archaeologists a clear picture of the process. The stone was likely shaped using iron chisels and then painstakingly hollowed out using a combination of drilling, chiseling, and the application of heat and cold to fracture the rock. But the transportation is the true marvel. The most accepted theory involves an immense expenditure of human labor. It's believed that the jars were moved using a system of ropes, wooden rollers, and levers, dragged and pushed by large teams of people along predetermined routes. This would have been a monumental communal effort, a project that would have required the coordination of hundreds of people for each jar, suggesting a highly organized society with a powerful central authority capable of marshalling such resources. The very act of moving them may have been part of the ritual, a final, physical testament to the importance of the individual being laid to rest. Adding a tragic, modern layer to this ancient mystery is the legacy of the secret war in Laos. From 1964 to 1973, the United States conducted a massive and clandestine bombing campaign over the country, making it, per capita, the most heavily bombed nation in history. The Xing Quang Plateau was squarely in the crosshairs, and countless bombs and unexploded ordnance littered the jar sites, rendering vast areas incredibly dangerous to access and study. For decades, this deadly blanket prevented archaeologists from properly investigating the plains, and clearance efforts are ongoing to this day. This modern conflict irrevocably damaged some sites and placed a permanent barrier between researchers and a complete understanding of the area, ensuring that many secrets of the jars remain protected not by time, but by the grim remnants of a 20th century war. The Plain of Jars thus stands as a dual monument, a haunting relic of an ancient, unknown culture whose purpose we can only partially decipher, and a somber reminder of how recent history can violently obscure our view of the deep past, leaving us to piece together the story of humanity one mysterious stone fragment at a time. Rising from a rural hilltop in Elbert County, Georgia, a stark and imposing granite monument stood for 4 decades, its origins as cryptic as its message. Erected in 1980, the Georgia Guidestones consisted of 6 massive slabs of granite, weighing over 110 tons in total, arranged with astronomical precision to track the sun and stars. Their face was a library of modern languages with a message for humanity carved in 8 different tongues: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. But who commissioned this modern-day Stonehenge, and what was the true meaning of the guidance it offered? the mystery began with its very creation. In June of 1979, a well-dressed, articulate man using the pseudonym Robert C. Christian walked into the office of the Elberton Granite Finishing Company. He claimed to represent a small group of loyal Americans who had been planning this project for 20 years, and he laid out incredibly detailed and precise specifications for the monument. He paid for the entire project through a local bank, his true identity known only to the bank president, who took the secret to his grave. The name Robert Christian was itself a likely nod to a legendary secret society, the Rosicrucians or Christian Rosencrews, adding another layer of occult intrigue to the affair. The 10 guidelines etched into the stone were a mix of pragmatic environmentalism and provocative social engineering, presented as a recipe for an age of reason. The first and most controversial directive read, "Maintain humanity under 500,000,000 in perpetual balance with nature." This number, less than a tenth of the current global population, was seen by many as a chilling call for mass depopulation. Other guidelines advised guiding reproduction wisely, unifying humanity with a new living language, ruling passion and faith with reason, and protecting people and nations with fair laws. While some of the messages promoted balance, tolerance, and harmony, the overall tone struck many as cold, utilitarian, and eerily dystopian. For some, the guidestones were a noble, forward-thinking effort to provide a blueprint for surviving future global crises. For others, they were a sinister manifesto for a globalist, elitist agenda, a monument to eugenics and population control erected by a shadowy group that believed it knew what was best for the future of the human race. This fundamental divide in interpretation fueled endless speculation about the true identity of the sponsors, with theories ranging from a secret society of Rosicrucians or Luciferians to a cabal of wealthy environmentalists preparing for a post-apocalyptic world. The mystery that had simmered for 42 years exploded into a definitive and violent finale on the morning of July 6, 2022. A security camera captured a loud explosion as a bomb detonated at the base of the supporting pillar, severely damaging one of the massive slabs. Later that day, authorities deemed the structure too unstable to remain standing and demolished the rest of the monument. The physical enigma was gone, but its spectral presence only grew larger. The destruction transformed the guidestones from a controversial monument into a full-blown modern legend. While officials later arrested a suspect and cited opposition to the monument's worldview as a motive, the act of its eradication felt like a chapter ripped from a thriller novel, perfectly mirroring the clandestine nature of its creation. The bombshell didn't solve the mystery, it cemented it. The anonymous builders had come in secret, and now their work had been taken down in an act of equally anonymous violence. The complete cycle of its existence, from its secretive commissioning to its violent, unsolved destruction, framed the entire story as a perfect modern parable. We are now left with only photographs, fragments, and a cascade of unanswerable questions. Were the guidestones a warning, a prophecy, or a threat? Were their creators visionaries or villains? Their physical absence has elevated them from a granite puzzle to a purely ideological spectre, a ghost of a message whose true purpose and authorship may now never be known, ensuring their controversial guidance will be debated for generations to come. Yet another discovery that forces us to reconsider the very origins of civilization comes not from a grand temple or tomb, but from a humble Neolithic village in Romania. In 1961, archaeologists excavating the site of Tartaria uncovered 3 small, fired clay tablets, buried carefully in a pit alongside the cremated remains of an individual. These unassuming objects, dating back to an astonishing 5300 BC, would become the center of a firestorm that continues to rage today. What makes the Tartaria tablets so explosively controversial are the symbols etched into their surfaces, a collection of abstract, angular signs that to many researchers look unmistakably like a form of writing. If this interpretation is correct, it would mean a sophisticated writing system was being used in the Balkans over 2,000 years before the earliest known Sumerian cuneiform in Mesopotamia, the civilization traditionally credited with inventing writing and thus history itself. The tablets themselves are small and fragmentary. Two are rectangular and one is circular, each covered in a series of precisely incised symbols. These aren't simple pictures of animals or people. They are a series of non-representational marks, lines, crosses, circles, and zigzags arranged in what appear to be organized rows and groupings. This structured arrangement is the key to the argument that they represent a script, a system of signs meant to convey specific linguistic information rather than just decorative or ritual symbols. The context of their discovery adds significant weight to this idea. They were found in a ritual pit placed near a clay figurine, suggesting they held a powerful, perhaps sacred meaning for the Voynich culture that created them. This advanced Neolithic culture, which flourished across southeastern Europe, was known for its sophisticated pottery, metallurgy, and far-reaching trade networks, making the leap to a primitive writing system not entirely implausible. The implications of authenticating these tablets as writing are truly revolutionary. It would completely upend the long-held cradle of civilization model, which places the birth of complex society, cities, and literacy squarely in the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East. Instead, it would suggest that the Balkan Peninsula was a parallel center of innovation, a place where the human mind independently cracked the code of representing spoken language in a permanent physical form. This wouldn't just change a date on a timeline, it would force a radical re-evaluation of the intellectual capabilities of prehistoric European societies, painting a picture of a much more interconnected and intellectually dynamic ancient world than we previously imagined. However, the mainstream archaeological community remains deeply divided and largely skeptical. The central problem is that the Tartaria tablets are a complete linguistic isolate. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, which provided a key to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs by comparing them to a known language, the symbols on the Tartaria tablets have no known counterpart. There are no other lengthy inscriptions, no bilingual texts, and no direct descendants of this script to compare it to. This makes it impossible to prove definitively that the symbols are truly writing, that is, a system that fully represents the nuances of a spoken language, rather than an elaborate system of proto-writing. Proto-writing includes things like property marks, ritual symbols, or mnemonic devices that convey information but lack the full grammar and syntax of a true script. Skeptics argue that the markings could be exactly that, a set of religious or ownership symbols understood only within a very specific local context, not a full-blown writing system capable of recording poetry or laws. Further complicating the issue is the date. The tablets were found in a pit that also contained materials from a later period, leading some critics to suggest they might be a later intrusion, perhaps even a hoax, though this theory has lost favor due to subsequent radiocarbon dating of associated materials. The most widely accepted skeptical view is that the symbols are part of a broader set of Voynich symbols found on pottery and figurines across the region. These symbols, while intriguing and widespread, show no evidence of evolving into a more complex writing system and disappear from the archaeological record without a trace. For these scholars, the Tartaria tablets are a fascinating and sophisticated example of Neolithic symbolism, but not the smoking gun for a lost written language. The debate ultimately encapsulates a fundamental challenge in archaeology. How do we distinguish the birth of true writing from more primitive symbolic communication? The Tartaria tablets sit right on that blurry line. They possess a level of complexity and organization that feels intentional and systematic, pushing us to believe we are looking at the real thing. Yet, without more evidence, they remain a tantalizing might have been, a ghost of a possibility that a cornerstone of human achievement may have been laid far earlier and in a very different place than our history books have ever admitted. They are a permanent reminder that the past is rarely as simple as our models suggest, and that the next shovel of earth could always reveal a truth that forces us to rewrite the story of ourselves. But our final stop takes us to a high-altitude plateau in Bolivia, where the very stones seem to defy not just time, but the fundamental limits of what we believe ancient humans could achieve with simple tools. Nestled near the shores of Lake Titicaca, not far from the more famous Tiwanaku complex, lies Puma Punku, a name that translates to the door of the puma. To the untrained eye, it appears as little more than a field of scattered, shattered megaliths, a chaotic jumble of stone blocks as if some gargantuan cataclysm had violently dismantled a great structure. Yet, a closer look at these individual blocks reveals a level of precision so advanced, so unnervingly perfect, that it has become the ultimate symbol of the ancient astronaut theory and a perpetual thorn in the side of conventional archaeology. The ruins are composed of a distinctive, incredibly hard stone called andesite and an even harder volcanic rock, diorite. What makes these blocks so utterly baffling is their design. They are not simple, rough-hewn squares. They are intricate geometric puzzles. Many feature perfectly flat surfaces with razor-sharp edges that meet at exact 90-degree angles. Others are carved with a series of complex, recessed grooves and protrusions that look less like ancient masonry and more like modern industrial machine parts designed to interlock with each other. Some blocks have perfectly identical H-shaped slots cut into them at precise intervals, while others feature dovetail clamps and channels that seem engineered for metal braces, though no metal has been found. The precision is microscopic, the cuts are so clean and the angles so exact that in many places you cannot fit a razor blade between the stones. This isn't just sophisticated stonework, it looks like mass production, as if each block was made from a master template with machine-tooled accuracy. The immediate and obvious question is how this was accomplished. The Tiwanaku culture, which built the site between 500 and 1000 CE, is not known to have had the wheel, draft animals, or a system of writing. They certainly did not have modern power tools. Conventional explanations suggest they used stone hammers, bronze tools, and an immense amount of patience. They might have employed a technique of pecking and grinding, using sand and water as an abrasive to slowly wear away the rock over generations. For the complex channels and holes, they could have used tubular drills, perhaps with a cord and a bow mechanism to spin them. While these methods are technically possible, they struggle to fully account for the sheer volume of identical, perfectly replicated blocks and the incredible consistency of the cuts. The level of perfectionism on display seems to go far beyond what was structurally necessary, suggesting a cultural obsession with precision for its own sake, or perhaps the use of a technology we have not yet identified. This gap in the conventional narrative has opened the door to more radical theories. Some researchers point to the vitrified or melted appearance on the surfaces of some stones, suggesting that the builders might have used a now-lost technique to temporarily soften the stone, making it malleable like clay so it could be molded into these intricate shapes before hardening back to its original diamond-like hardness. While intriguing, no evidence for such a chemical compound or process has ever been discovered. The most famous and controversial theory, of course, is that the builders of Puma Punku had help from a much more advanced source, perhaps even an extraterrestrial one. Proponents of this view argue that the site's precision is simply too great to have been achieved with primitive tools, and that the geometric, almost clinical appearance of the blocks resembles advanced manufacturing rather than ancient craftsmanship. They see Puma Punku not as a temple, but as a complex machine or a landing platform whose true function we can no longer comprehend. Perhaps the most compelling mystery of Puma Punku is not just the how, but the why and the what happened. The site appears to have been devastated by a cataclysmic event, possibly a massive earthquake combined with a sudden rise in the level of Lake Titicaca. The blocks are not just fallen, they are scattered as if by an unimaginable force, with multi-ton stones tossed great distances. This violent end adds another layer of profundity to the mystery. We are left with the ruins of a technological marvel, a puzzle whose pieces are so perfectly made that we can barely understand how they were crafted, let alone what incredible structure they were meant to form when assembled. Puma Punku stands as a silent, broken machine from a forgotten world, a testament to a level of engineering genius that seems to belong to another age entirely, challenging us to expand our understanding of human potential and leaving us to wonder if the true story of our past is far grander and far stranger than we have ever dared to imagine. And so we arrive at the end of our journey through 25 of the world's most puzzling archaeological discoveries, from the intricate gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the scattered, precision-cut stones of Puma Punku. But what are we to make of this collection of anomalies, these whispers from the past that refuse to fit neatly into our history books? Collectively, they form a powerful testament to one humbling truth. The story of humanity is far richer, far more complex, and infinitely more mysterious than any single narrative can contain. These aren't mere curiosities, they are profound challenges to the established timeline, each one a crack in the foundation of our understanding, suggesting that chapters of human achievement have been lost, forgotten, or perhaps even deliberately buried. It's a fascinating paradox of our time that the more technological power we wield, with our satellite imaging, our ground-penetrating radar, and our advanced dating techniques, the more we realize how much we still don't know. For every mystery we solve, two more seem to emerge from the earth. The past is not a static puzzle waiting for the final piece to be placed. It is a living, breathing enigma that continually evolves with each new discovery. These 25 finds remind us that history is not a closed book written by experts, but an open invitation, an ongoing investigation where a farmer draining a pond, a diver exploring a reef, or a construction crew digging a trench can stumble upon an artifact that forces the entire world to stop and reconsider everything. This sense of wonder is what ultimately connects us to every explorer, scholar, and dreamer who has ever looked at an ancient object and asked how. And why? It's the driving force behind archaeology itself. The real treasure isn't just finding answers, it's the thrill of the search, the courage to question, and the humility to accept that some secrets are meant to endure, pushing each new generation to look closer and think deeper. So we turn the question over to you. Which of these 25 discoveries captured your imagination most profoundly? Was it the celestial computer from ancient Greece, the impossible map of Antarctica, the hidden grottos of China, or the enigmatic warnings on the Georgia guidestones? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We're endlessly fascinated by the mysteries you find most compelling. Your curiosity is the most important tool in this ongoing excavation of our past, because the next great discovery that rewrites our story is still out there, waiting just beneath the surface for someone like you to uncover it.